Kerstin Rodgers, that's my real name. You would only have known my real name for the last year, because before that I was known as Ms. Marmite Lover. And the reason for that was I wanted to keep myself a secret. I was a blogger, I started out as a blogger, and first of all I was writing about quite intimate things, and I wasn't sure if I wanted everybody to know. And then secondly, I started a food blog, and I started my own supper club at the Underground restaurant, a restaurant in my living room in Kilburn. And I was one of the first, along with my friend Horton Jupiter, and basically I wasn't sure how legal it was. So I came up with this fake name, Ms. Marmite Lover. And I just wanted to say, how does this work? Okay, just check it out. I wanted to say that I do actually eat Marmite. So I eat it every day, Marmite on toast. And Marmite, as you can see, sent me a lovely pot of Marmite with my face on it, which was my proudest moment, like winning an Oscar. Now, the thing about the supper clubs, it's now become a massive movement. Oops, I'm going to talk about myself. I can't even remember what slides I've put here. So it's become a massive movement. There's hundreds of them now in the UK. And I just want to say a word about social media. We've got Twitter here. 2-3 years ago, practically nobody was using Twitter. I was quite an early adopter, and I started in the middle of 2008. So I think the supper club movement would have happened without social media, but it would have been a lot slower. Definitely, social media accelerates the whole process, and it makes it very easy for someone to start up a small business. So I think it's fantastic in that way. Before I became a chef and a cook and an author, I was a photographer. I shot various stars, people like Morrissey, Madness, Paul Weller, Aswad, all different people. There's one photo here in the middle, which is a group called, I don't know if I can pronounce this correctly, Eisenstazendi Neubauten, who were a German group who trashed the ICA, and they tried to drill a tunnel. They were sort of industrial, they had lots of pickaxes and drills. They tried to drill a tunnel through to Buckingham Palace. So that was quite a famous gig. After that, how I got into cooking, I started working, I was an activist, and I was working at various kind of vegan, co-op, punk, anarchist restaurants where there was no hierarchy, man, you know, and everything was done by consensus. I often got in trouble because actually in a kitchen there is a hierarchy. Somebody has to be boss. And I was pretty bossy in the kitchen, and some of them didn't like that. You know, I was very involved with the activist movement. I was in a samba band called Rhythms of Resistance, and they'd often go to anti-G8 camps. Now, I don't know if anyone here has ever been to like Occupy or the anti-G8 camps, but the food is pretty good actually. A lot of it's skipped or dumpster dived, as they say in America, and you can make fantastic dishes out of that. I recommend going to one of these protest camps just for the food, actually. I ran a kitchen. At the anti-GA camps, they were divided into barrios, and each barrio had a kitchen, and I ran one of them. And a lot of the time it was stuff out of bins, but I always tried to do something better than what I call vegan slop. You know, they had the kind of brown slop, you don't know what it is. I tried to do something interesting. I was sort of trying to make kind of nettle pesto with a cricket bat and things like that. So I was always fascinated with food, even though my training was that as a photographer. I also cooked for punk legend Lydia Lunch, and you know, basically had quite a varied, untraditional route into food. Certainly wasn't doing a training. I wasn't at a cookery school. I wasn't at a Michelin star restaurant, so it was very unusual. So January 2009, I started up the Underground restaurant. Since then, I've had a lot of problems with the word underground. I meant it in a countercultural way, like the 60s way, but London Transport have been trying to take action against me for about 3 years now. They sent me a letter saying, we've noted that you're using the word underground restaurant. We object to this because confusion could arise. And I said, well, I'm not actually running a rival mass transit system from my living room. But we're still arguing. They still keep sending me letters, and I try not to take any notice of them. I really dislike that's, along with what Simon's saying about the libel laws, I really hate the way the big corporations are trying to nick our words and use them only for their own purposes. You can't trademark underground. I was very scared when the first night I did it in January 2009, The Guardian came along. So I was really cacking myself, basically. And it was very frightening. I thought I was doing this food blog. I didn't think anybody read it. And the next thing I knew, all these comments were there. And, 15 people were supposed to turn up the first week. Actually, only 12 came. And that's when I realised I can't do it this way. I'm going to lose money. I've got no walk-in traffic. I have to develop a system which people book in advance. So I linked up with a ticket site who sold normally rock tickets called We Got Tickets. And I said to them, they were very nervous about the whole thing. I mean, are you legal? Are you allowed to do this? Are we sure we're allowed to do tickets? I went, yeah, I'll be fine. I've got health and safety, don't worry. And so because basically that means at least if people didn't turn up, I had the money in advance, because you buy the ingredients in advance. It's funny enough, even when people pay in advance, often they don't turn up, which is kind of weird. So I'm really glad I instituted that system. So, as you can see, I was sometimes plating up on an ironing board, I was plating up on the floor, but it is, I can assure you, I have passed, the council have been round and checked out my kitchen. It's perfectly hygienic. In fact, I would say it's cleaner than any restaurant kitchen. But I have a nice flat, that's my living room, and there's my kitchen. I cook everything on an Aga. And which is, I think, there's only one other restaurant in the whole of the UK that cooks everything on an Aga. So it really is slow cooking, the slow food movement. And it takes a certain amount of skill to cook on an Aga. And I have had sort of pro chefs come and help me, and they're absolutely flummoxed by it, can't cope with it. A few more pictures. Some of the guests get quite excited. There's a woman who started belly dancing at the dinners. That was very exciting. There's one week we had an ice cream van. I sent everybody out for their pudding out into the front drive, and they got their pudding from an ice cream van. So you try to play with food and make it more exciting, and I also do an awful lot of theme meals, which I'll be talking about later. That's a bit. My daughter said, "Oh, you can't put that, Mum." Celeb guess, but I have had a few celebrities. Hardeep Singh Kohli came and helped me cook. He was brilliant. I mean, I didn't tell anybody beforehand, and the guests couldn't believe it. They were going, "I recognise him." He was like doing the waiting, and they thought it was amazing. This handsome guy, the blonde guy, he was Prince Charles's chef, and I couldn't believe it when he wanted to come and help, and he'd tell me all the gossip. That was fantastic. And he actually, I did a sort of alternative role but wedding banquet last year, and he came along and helped me cook. So it was amazing. We did shows with George Lamb, MasterChef winner Matt Follis, I don't know if you remember him. Can't remember this guy's name actually. Louis Theroux, that's it. He was really nice, and I was on the Vanessa show. So it really kind of caught the imagination, and I did get a lot of publicity, which kind of shocked me, because being a photographer and being a chef, actually that's kind of a backroom job. It's really the kind of job that you don't really want to be in public, and look where I am now, I'm in public a lot. And I had to sort of, when the guests came first of all, I realised they actually wanted to meet me. I suppose they were coming to my house. Of course they wanted to know whose house it was. And then I started doing a little talk about the meal before every supper. I talk about the ingredients. A lot of the meals are quite conceptual, so I talk about, why I serve this and where I obtain the ingredients from. And I started to like explaining and talking about food, but it was a real change for me, and it was, the first 6 months, with all the kind of press attention, it was quite hard to get used to that, and try and work out how to run a restaurant from my living room. Because I really basically was making it up as I went along, and I didn't know what I was doing. Let's slide. I think I'm getting the hang of this now. So the theme meals I do, I started off doing kind of national cuisine like Indian, Arabic, Sri Lankan, Caribbean. I then moved on to slightly more conceptual things like literary themes. Oh, the Harry Potter one, that was shockingly in the press as well. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was a couple of years ago. And my daughter's a big fan of Harry Potter, and I decided to do a Harry Potter themed meal at Halloween. A week before the meal happened, and had been sold out for months, it was 2 nights on the trot in the end, because the first one was so popular. Warner Brothers got in touch with me and said, "You can't do a Harry Potter meal. It's come to our attention that you're doing a Harry Potter meal. This is in breach of copyright. Plus, you're not allowed to serve butterbeer." And I said, well, actually, butterbeer is an ancient medieval recipe, and yes, I can. But that got a lot of worldwide press as well. I was even on perezhilton.com, which I thought was kind of weird. But I just went ahead with it. They said you can't call it Harry Potter, you can call it generic wizard night. So that's what I did. But I couldn't stop people coming dressed up as Dementors and Harry Potter and all that kind of thing. Recently I've done quite a lot of musical themes like Judy Liza night, Barbra Streisand night, Dolly Parton, always very popular. She's actually got a cookbook out, you know. It's called Dolly's Dixie Fixins. Got some great recipes. I did an Elvis night, pretty much everything was fried. I did a Margaret Thatcher tea, which I made protest biscuits. It was all Maggie, 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 out, all piped in icing. And I made Margaret Thatcher cake pops. Each one took me an hour to mould her head in cake. But it's great fun. So I've done quite a lot of different themed meals. Now in London there's at least 200 supper clubs. There probably is one in your local area from wherever you come. So you can find a supper club to find out your local one, or come and visit me in Kilburn. I've been also around the UK. I went to Edinburgh. Now, what I think is great about supper clubs is I've actually been to Edinburgh several times, and I think it's quite a cold city. It's very hard to penetrate somehow and get to know people. When I went up there to visit supper clubs, I went to 3 in a weekend, and suddenly I was hearing all the gossip and what it's really like to live there. And I really think you get to know about a country or a city, its inhabitants, and how they cook and what the best food is. I think it's a fantastic way of travelling. So if you're going on holiday, find a supper club, and you can also check out a supper club, say in New York or wherever. I'll show you some pictures from some of the others. They're more and more starting up north. It's not just a London phenomenon. Obviously, it's most popular here because it started here. But I'm hoping more and more will start in the rest of the country. And what's great about it is it's a micro business. It's also an opportunity for women chefs, because still there's not a lot of chefs who are women working in restaurants, and there's very good reasons for that. If you've got children, you can't do evening service. You can't work those kind of hours. It's not possible. So this is a way for a really good woman cook who can do a part-time restaurant and thereby start a small business from her home. And it's very flexible. It's a cheap business model. So I think it should be encouraged. Now, up north, they seem to be mostly doing secret teas. There's a lot of tea rooms. They're great bakers up there. And one of the things I noticed, when I do a tea in London, hardly any men come. Well, it's only women or gay men. But up north, men eat cake. They're not ashamed to eat cake. And they bake. They love going to tea. I don't know why London men don't. Recently, I went to Belfast, and that was really interesting. There are 2 supper clubs at the moment in Belfast, and they're both run by lesbian couples who have allotments. And it's a pure coincidence, they don't even know each other. I don't know why that happened, but I spent the weekend there, it was fantastic. Basically, you had Catholics and Protestants sitting at the table together, discussing the past, and of course, food is a great way of, you're breaking bread together. It creates links between communities. So, I mean, that whole big society rubbish that Cameron spouts, but actually it does work through food. I make a distinction with, if there's a genre of supper clubs, I make a distinction between home restaurants, which is mostly what I run, although I do some pop-ups, and pop-ups. Now, one of the best that I've ever been to is a place called this time in Ballymaloe in Ireland, Southern Ireland, and it was called Outstanding in the Field. And the guy that created that is a land artist, and he makes sculptures of, in a way, he's doing kind of dinner party sculptures, long lines of tables and chairs and plates and glasses along beaches or in fields, and this time in a massive greenhouse. The food was absolutely fantastic. Do check them out when they next come to Europe. I went to Paris, where one of the oldest supper clubs started. It's a guy called Jim Haynes, the older guy there, and he's been doing it for 30 years. Now, I actually lived in Paris for 6 or 7 years, and it's quite a tough city. It's quite hard to get to know other people, and unfortunately, I didn't even know that he existed. My influence, the reason why I started it, is because I went to Cuba, and they have paladares, which are home restaurants there, and that's what gave me my idea. I didn't actually know about Jim, and I didn't know about the supper clubs in America either before I started here, which is a great shame. The ones, there's another one that's photographed there, which is called Hidden Dining, and that's got a very long waiting list. It's very expensive. Supper clubs, I mean, London, they range anything from 25 quid in someone's council flat to 120 quid at the Loft, which is a kind of shishi East End warehouse. Okay, so, there's a whole variety. You can sometimes live in a castle or in a boat, anywhere. It's worth checking them all out. I also went to Bologna, where there's Cesarina, which are Italian grandmothers. They invite you into their house, and you can eat their food. And the best Italian cooking is in people's houses. So worth checking that out as well. Berlin, there's a huge scene going on there of supper clubs, worth checking out. And Sweden, I went to there just before Christmas. That was fantastic. I went to one in Stockholm, one in Gothenburg. Great food, got to meet the people. And actually going to their supper clubs was cheaper than going to a normal restaurant because it's quite expensive there. New York got a huge scene. I would say supper clubs in general in the States are much more expensive and often run by pro chefs. Personally, I'm more interested in creative home cooking, but it was, well worth visiting. I also do something called the Underground Farmers Market, which I have a 2-bedroom garden flat, and I fit about 2 or 3 times a year, about 40 stalls, all doing kind of making their own cheese, smoking their own fish, kind of urban DIY punk cookery. And they, 500 or 600 people pile into my flat. We do food demos, there's live music, there's a bonfire, and it's fantastic fun. I think there's no limit to what you can use your home for. And there's some more pictures from the Underground Farmers Market. There's guys serving cocktails on ironing boards and cupcakes on the bed and all kinds of things going on. I also do conferences in my living room. I did a conference on how to become a successful blogger. So we had people talking about writing, uploading digital photographs, and that was very well attended. I've done quarterly comedy nights curated by Josie Long, and that's a really tough gig. You're in a room, in a living room, no lighting, no mic, no stage, and you just have to be funny to 30 people who are eating dinner. But it's great fun. And finally, that's my book, Supper Club, which is for sale at the end. That's it. Did I overrun? Sorry.